Are you testing it out?
No, we're rolling.
Oh, we're rolling now? You want to go now? I guess we can start now. Sure, why not?
Ready, set, go.
Usually we always have like some bloopers and stuff like that. We always just cut out. So, okay, I guess we're going now. You ready to go?
Yeah. Is this live?
This
All
no,
across
it's not live.
America.
No, he's gonna edit all this stuff out. He'll do some cool highlights and stuff. And yeah, like I said, just talk about whatever you want to talk about. Something you don't want to talk about. We'll probably take a few breaks in between.
Yeah.
So we can do that as well. And then I'll give you a nice introduction and try to cover everything you got here. But you got 4 BSMs, right?
3.
3 BSMs.
3 BSMs with V.
Awesome. Okay.
I think, yeah, 3.
All right. Well, Ken, welcome to the Howard Show. I really appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me.
I mean, man, it's an honor, like, to have, like, you're really like one of the best, well-known controllers out there. I usually like to tell people how I know the guest on the show, and the way I know you was you were my NDOC instructor about 2010 timeframe, and I never would have thought at NDOC I'd be sitting here across the room from you doing a podcast right now. But
I don't think they had podcasts back then.
I don't think they did either. But had you at NDOC, and then when I got to the 2-3, you weren't my team sergeant, but you were on one of the other teams. But kind of felt like you were everybody's team sergeant just because you put so many guys through training. And I mean, you've been at it since 1992. So just to kind of give everybody a little introduction on you, 30 years of military service, all as an operator. Started off as Marine Recon, 4 years, then crossed over to combat control, and you did that for 26 years. You were a 2-4 Tier 1 controller, 3 Bronze Star Medal with Valor, and did the initial invasion, I think, in Afghanistan and Iraq. And you just got, I mean, an incredible military service. So thank you so much for coming on the show. Really, really is an honor. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Sometimes I just say I was too stupid to quit. That's why I stayed so long.
Yeah. So I actually didn't realize you were from Texas.
Yeah.
Same as me.
Yeah, great state of Texas.
Yeah. So mom, dad, were they military or what?
Nah, my grandma mostly raised me. My dad was kind of a shitbag. Didn't have anything to do with us. And my mom was in and out when she had a boyfriend that liked kids, and when she didn't, she wasn't. But my grandma was my rock. And so most of the time I spent was with my grandma, raised up anyway. Was a little bit of a delinquent growing up, did some stupid stuff. Thank goodness. That's probably why I had to go to the Marine Corps before the Air Force. I probably wouldn't have gotten into the Air Force straight away. But when I was little, me and my grandma, she'd always turn on the war movies. So we'd watch war movies, and I'm like, yeah, someday I want to do that. And then when I got to the age to do military, because didn't have a lot of money, and there weren't a lot of other options other than that, college-wise, wasn't a lot of options for that. Then I just went around and wanted to find out which was the hardest branch. And so at the time, you know, in the small town I was from, the Marine Corps appeared to be the hardest branch. So I was like, I want to do that. And then when I went in to do the recruiting thing, I asked the recruiter, I said, well, I want whatever the hardest job is. Shows you how stupid I was, too stupid to quit. But so then, you know, recruiters are so honest with you. He's like, yeah, you want to go and be an infantry. That's the hardest. Well, it's the one that sucks the most anyway. But and then I found out about Recon, and I said, I want to do that. And he goes, well, you know, the best way to get to Recon is infantry. So you want to go infantry. So I was like, yeah, I want to be infantry. So then I went to boot camp, and I ended up becoming an honor grad. And they said, you can have any MOS, any job in the Marine Corps. And I said, infantry, because in my mindset, that was the easiest way to recon. And the guy goes, you can have any job in the Marine Corps. Yeah, infantry. And they're like, okay, infantry. They knew how stupid I was. I just didn't know how stupid I was at the time.
Were you 18 or 17?
I was 18. I left, I graduated high school, and 7 days later, I was on the yellow footprints.
Oh, wow.
In basic training. So yeah, I was, man, if I knew the things I knew now back then.
So did the transition to recon, did that happen in boot camp? Like a trial?
Nah, so back then, recon wasn't a primary MOS or AFSC or job. It was secondary. So you had to go to some other career field, and then you could try out for recon. So I went infantry. It has the shortest really tech school because I mean you just infantry, don't have to learn a whole lot. And so I went through there, and then as soon as I got to my first duty station, which was Kaneohe, Hawaii, I tried out for the first NDOC that I could, and then I got picked up, and the platoon sergeant I had at the time was kind of an asshole, and he was like, "Nope, you have to go on a float before you can go to recon." And I was like, I don't want to do that. So I did what they call request mass, which means you can ask for an audience of officer in a different or different levels. And I requested mass to, at the time, Colonel Rollins, which later became General Rollins. But he was a recon guy from Vietnam, and his Sergeant Major St. Pierre, was a recon guy from Vietnam, and they were teammates. And so I requested mass to his level so that I could go straight to recon without doing a float. And the initiative I took, they kind of were, impressed by it. So they let me go straight into recon. So I got to go into recon before having to do a float. So I spent the majority of my time in recon, 3rd Recon Battalion at the time, which was amazing. Great group of guys. I still keep in touch with them now. We had a small little mini reunion, and then they have reunions down here. They've had them twice. And then the Recon Foundation comes down once a year into the Destin area and helps, teammates, kind of like First Air does for our cool. Teammates. And the CCA Foundation, Combat Control Foundation, does for our guys. But I still keep in touch with a lot of them. And then what ended up driving me to the Air Force was because recon wasn't a primary job at the time, or primary MOS. There was a period of time where the Marine Corps said, hey, they wanted recon Marines to either do drill instructor or recruiter. And if you didn't do either one of those, do a rotation in one of those, they said they were going to send you back to your primary MOS, primary job. And so a lot of us were like, well, fuck you, we're going to take option other and go to a different branch. And luckily, Bart Decker at the time came out with a combat control team and came in staged out of our facility and did some training. And so I got to know him, and so he wrote me a reference letter to come to combat control because it was a lot of the same dudes, same type of personalities, and doing a lot of the same kind of mission sets, the jump in, the dive in, and the, just different focused mission areas, but a lot of the same conceptually activities. So he wrote me a reference letter, and then I got out because I didn't want to go back to be infantry for a season, because I didn't want to do instructor or drill instructor or recruiting. Mm-hmm. And then after that, they stopped doing that, and then they made it a primary, and then now they have MAJCOM, so they've evolved well past that time since then. But then I came over into combat control, and the reason I picked combat control versus any of the other branches or any other soft entities were 3 main reasons. One was quality of life. Air Force's quality of life, you can't argue, and anyone who argues it hasn't had the experience of the other branches. But that was one of it. And then the other, funny enough, was pay. Like in the Marine Corps, we maintained jump and dive, but we only got paid for one. At the time, we didn't get paid for both.
Really?
We only got paid for one. Whereas, the Air Force was getting jump, dive, and special duty pay. I'm like, oh, these guys are rich compared to, the Marine Corps. Yeah. And all the equipment. Look at all this top-end equipment they got. And then the last one was mission opportunity, which is something that is kind of a frustrating time for me now that I won't try to go down too much of a rabbit hole on. But you integrate with all the SOF entities within the U.S. and then foreign SOF entities as a combat controller. And so mission opportunity, you're in like a controller, back in the day, especially in the first phases of Afghanistan and Iraq, we're involved in every significant battle because you're integrated with all the SOF teams. Mm-hmm. I know they're trying to get away from that now, which I'm not a big fan of. I think it's mostly because officers want to own battle space. Some of our officers do, when, there are areas you can do that in without having to take us away from that role. But that was the primary reason, is just the mission opportunity was, you know, you're involved in everything, or you have the opportunity to be involved in every conflict or every significant battle.
Yeah.
So that was a huge reason why I came over. And then in the beginning, I mean, it was just a lot of fun, you know, training. I mean, you went through the pipeline. It's just training after training after training, which is a good time. Which is, you know, when I reflect back on it now, because now I just sit behind a desk and do input sheets and want to, you know, beat my head against the wall and throw the computer out the window kind of thing. Like, where have I come from kind of thing. But that's why I do jiu-jitsu, to keep myself from like beating the shit out of somebody or wanting to, you know, fucking punch somebody in the face for doing stupid shit. But
were you the only recon from your unit or team that went to CCT?
Nah, we had a huge number of people. Tony Arnold, there was like during that period is when a shit ton of Marines came over. Terry Saltzman, like I said, Tony Arnold. There were a handful of other guys that came over too. But me and Tony Arnold, he was actually second force, but him and I went through the pipeline together. And he came over for the exact same reason, because they were trying to push a lot of our guys within the community into one of those realms. So he came over and he was in the pipeline with me during that period of time too.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of cool that you cross-trained. You already had your dive bubble. You already had jump wings.
Yeah, I had everything except free fall. And I even had dive soup, and I had static line jump master.
Wow.
At the
4
time.
years, you had all that done.
Yeah.
Wow.
Luckily, we were a small enough entity there, 3rd Recon, and we had a lot of good opportunities for like dive school. It was real easy to get dive school with the Marine Corps, so those weren't too hard to come by. Other than back then, the way they did pre-scuba was you did pre-scuba, and then they would say, okay, we have 2 school seats. If you didn't get one of those school seats, then you had to do the next pre-scuba. And then that would determine, because how you ranked in the pre-scuba was whether you got a seat or not. So my first pre-scuba, I got 3rd, and I think there was only 2 seats. And so I had to do a second pre-scuba, and then the second pre-scuba, I was like, fuck that. So I put out until I almost killed myself, and I got 1st, and then we got 6 slots. And I was like, are you fucking kidding me? But I didn't want to have to do a 3rd pre-scuba. So that's why I smoked myself on the 2nd iteration to do that. And then by luck, we had almost all of us got static line, but a jump master MTT came out. So it was just sheer luck that I got static line jump master before coming in the Air Force. And then so the only thing I had to get was free fall.
No, that's super cool. I mean, I'm gonna post this in the video, but like just looking at your like military bio, which is 3 pages long, of all the schools you went to, assignments you were into. I mean, I've never seen one this long before. And like I said, I was at the unit with you, but I knew you did a lot of stuff, but I don't usually be like, hey, you know, Master Sergeant Huhman, can I see like your bio? Like, I mean, like it's impressive. Like it really, really is.
I think most of it was because I would volunteer for things that nobody else wanted to do. Like even, like I got a tower rating, but the only reason I got a tower rating is I was deployed on a Southern Watch, which we got a few cool things, like a UAS went down in Iraq, and we actually got to go in. I mean, it was only like 5 miles into Iraq, so we snuck in there and grabbed it and got out. But I was on that deployment and then came back, and another guy was set up for the control tower to get the CTO rating, and he had some family thing come up, and they asked everyone, and everyone's like, no, because you had to leave in a week for 6 months, and they asked everyone, and they're like, God, in a week's not, you know, enough time. Turn around. I was like, I'll go. So I ended up going to that. So anytime there was something, I'd volunteer to do it, no matter what it was. But.
Yeah. So when the Marine Corps, was there any operations that happened during that time?
Not for me. For me, during the Marine Corps, it's just mostly training and floats. I went on a few floats in the South Pacific. I did get to go run fake security for the Tongan king at one time. It's me and one other guy got picked up for that. That was just because I was a good runner, and he rode a bicycle while we ran. But we thought we were just going to run with him until we saw him, and we're like, oh, this is going to be more like a walk. And then he got on a bicycle, and we're like, oh shit, he's going to smoke us. Mm-hmm. But we did a lot of things, just floated in the South Pacific and island hop. Some Navy guy got caught in the surf and drowned, and so we spent, although this sounded fun at the moment, we got to go do search dives to look for his body, but the rest of the ship went to Australia and spent some time in Australia while we looked in, I think we were in Tahiti or Tonga. I can't remember, maybe it's Tonga or Tahiti. It's one of those places, but we did search dives for like a week looking for this, missing sailor, and everybody else went to Australia and partied. Mm-hmm. And we thought that was a kind of a cool thing, but it ended up not being that cool because they went and partied in Australia, and we never found him. Found a bunch of sharks though, but never found him.
Well, I see here it says you did your JTAC in 1998.
Yeah, it must
have been way different.
Oh, it was way different. Well, so the evolution of the JTAC stuff back then, you had low threat, high altitude casts, which is where you would just do talk-ons. And then you had high threat, low threat, high altitude, and then you had high threat, low altitude casts, which were 9 lines. Yeah. But nowadays, you do your 9 line and then you give your, it's almost all of it's combined together. But back then we didn't have JTAC records, and the only reason I volunteered because not the whole team was JTAC, but I was like, yeah, I'll do it because they had the coolest trips. You'd go out on these ranges and you'd call in casts, and then, sometime have night lines, but then you'd spend the rest of the time partying. So it was always the coolest trips than going out and setting up an airfield and running airfields, which took, all day or all night. And you had a bunch of, bigwig. You had, senior team guys there. All the leadership was always on the airfield trips because they were larger. So you was under scrutiny and you couldn't party as much. And the JTAC trips was just you and one other guy that y'all were probably both staff sergeants or maybe 2 senior airmen just on these trips all by yourself, alone and afraid, not really just, so it was like the wild, wild west. So I was like, yeah, I'll do that. Go out and get drunk all night, and then unless you had night lines, and then you get drunk all day. No, I'm just joking.
Something else I saw that I've never seen this on a controller's record. It said Navy SEAL Diving Supervisor Course.
So the dive soup course, I didn't have dive soup of the closed circuit. Mm-hmm. So when I went to the 24th, I needed to get closed circuit. So the only one that really did that was the Navy SEALs had a small closed circuit dive supervisor course that I could go to rather than having to go through the whole dive soup course in itself. So it's just an add-on. So I didn't have to go through the whole thing again. So it was just a very small class, gentleman's course. It wasn't really that hard. Nothing really cool to talk about with that.
I just saw it. I was like, you know what? I've never seen that before. Did you do any of, was that like Bosnia in the late 90s?
I didn't get a chance to do any of that because I was out in Hawaii. So, and then my transition into the Air Force, I was in the 2-1. We mostly did Southern Watch. Mm-hmm. I did a couple of Southern Watches during my period before 9/11 happened. And then once 9/11 happened, then that's when, all the fun stuff really occurred. I did volunteer for a lot of stuff, but that's, why I ended up, 2 ex-wives deep, because I was, my first ex-wife, I was gone on average 300 days a year for, I think, 4 years, which then resulted in the first ex-wife. And then
that's something a lot of people don't realize with being the operator. The lifestyle it's not easy. Not for family life.
No, and that's why I hold no ill will against her. What do you expect? You're gone 300 days for 4 years average. So some days, some years I was even gone more than that. You just grow apart.
Yeah.
And you're just 2 different people. And I was young and dumb when we first got married, so it just worked out that way. No ill will towards her whatsoever.
Yeah. So you started at the 2-1, and then
I started 2-1 and then went to the 2-4, which was another almost like Marine Corps story. I forget who it was. Who was it? I can't remember. I forget who the chief was at the time, but the chief at the time, I went to do the 2-4 assessment, and he said, well, we're not going to let you go because you just went to the tower and you owe us time here at the unit before you can go to the tower. So then I requested an audience with the commander so that I could go to the 2-4 without delaying my time, and the commander let me go. And then I was in green team when 9/11 happened.
Oh, wow.
So we were actually one of the first planes back in the air because I was at the advanced beating course in Washington. And our team was back in the air and then went back and then got all ginned up, and we graduated green team a little early because of that. I mean, they still had us rush through a few things, but we were towards the end of our training cycle anyway. I think we only had maybe a couple more items, and we rushed through those items and then graduated a little earlier than we were supposed to, and then in Afghanistan.
So from there, did you get attached to, like, I guess, Delta or Dev Group and push out?
Yep. So I was at the time with the recce team, and there was a handful of us that got put with recce entities, recon entities, because of our background. So my Marine background with reconnaissance, I was with the recce team. So my first deployment, it was just me and a couple of green guys, and then a couple of agency guys. And we just we went around, and our mission was just to find bin Laden. Was our mission. It wasn't so much of the stuff you see on TV. There were guys that were there, doing the initial invasion, just, smoking dudes. But ours was more of just trying to locate the primary reason why we were there.
Is that the photo of you and those guys that you showed me?
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll post that up. That was a pretty cool photo. What year was that? Was that?
That was 01,
01?
November 01.
Wow.
Right before the snow fell. But we went further east than the Russians ever made it for us. And then the Horseback one, the one where I'm on horse, that was actually in areas that we really weren't supposed to be in, but we were in areas where no Westerner had ever been up to that date. And our Horseback is where we went into where the roads ended, and we were just looking for him in a lot of the old goat trails that you just couldn't get a vehicle into.
That was the same time frame as, like, the Horse Soldiers, like the movie and all that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Air Force wasn't there for that in the movie.
In the movie, it wasn't there. Even though that guy's, I think he actually lives here.
Yeah.
I want to say.
Yeah.
Well, how was that? I guess, like, just flying in there, and what, you met with locals, got some horses.
Yeah. Well, so everything was facilitated with the locals, and there were no bases really. So we stayed in just compounds, local compounds, paid them to stay there. And then all our security was locals. We didn't have, like, when I went later once I was at the 2-3 and went, where you had, big robust security and Humvees and stuff. All our vehicles were local trucks that we modified out, and I learned a lot about the wiring systems in vehicles because we kept blowing fuses. So we'd bring extra size fuses and stuff so that we could hook in a lot of our communications equipment. But everything was paying for security and or linking up with allies that were against the Taliban and not supporting the Taliban, and maneuvering that way. So it was very ad hoc, but it was also a lot of wild west. So there wasn't nearly the scrutiny that I had in later deployments. Like we lost one of our deltas on one of our deployments because of the ROEs. In the beginning, we had, war crimes, don't do war crime stuff, but it wasn't nearly the ROEs that you had in later in Afghanistan. Like for my first one, if you identified enemy and you could have a good, PID on the enemy, positive identification that is enemy, then it's free game. Whereas the last one, they weren't. I mean, you had to get approval from a GO level to drop on a compound if you didn't have the opportunity to clear the compound. And that was like one of the hardest deployments that I actually had in one of the BSMs with V is we were catching fire from this compound for a full day, and they wouldn't let us drop on it because we couldn't get into the compound to make sure there was nothing but enemy. But all we were receiving was fire from it for 24 hours. And what ended up happening was they shot an airburst RPG, and it ended up killing, well, it wounded one guy next to me and killed another guy next to me, but the other guy ended up dying because we couldn't get medevac in enough time. So we called in medevac. The first medevac came in, and the PJ got shot on the medevac, so it pulled off from the compound. Wow. Still would not let us drop on it. And then so if we would have got the guy out on that first medevac, I think he would have lived. But then the second, or maybe even the second medevac came in, and the co-pilot got shot. And then they let me drop, and I leveled the compound. And once I leveled the compound, the third medevac came in, didn't take a single round. But by that time, he was already dead.
That was 01?
That one was with the 2-3.
Oh,
so that was when I was with an ODA.
Gotcha.
In the first one, our goal wasn't to drop, so I didn't drop a lot in the first one. We were just trying to, blend in with locals, and our mission was to find bin Laden. It wasn't, the other teams had the mission to smoke Taliban. Mm-hmm. Our mission was just to try to locate.
Did you get close to him, you think, or?
I think we found him at one point, and we got pulled off. We found this cave that had, it almost looked like a Radio Shack worth of stuff going into it, and it was way up in the mountains in the east, real close to the Paki border. I mean, it was really easy to maneuver in between Afghanistan and Pakistan on some of the smuggler routes that were out there. I think that we found him, but and that's just my opinion, I think under the administration that we were under at the time didn't want to find him too early because, and this is just my opinion, no official piece on it, but I think if we would have found him too early, then we would not have had the support from the country to continue what we needed to do, which was clear out the terrorist safe haven and the training camps that we really needed to do so there wouldn't be another attack on us. Mm-hmm. I think we would have lost that support because it's like, oh no, we're just here to find him because he's the one responsible, which a lot of people don't realize. You cut the head off the snake and then another head grows mm-hmm. in its place. So we really needed to subdue the capability of training up terrorists to come over here and have free will to do whatever they wanted with us. So that's why I didn't harbor any ill will, but I think we were pretty damn close to snagging him at the time, but that's just my opinion.
That team you were on, it was just like a 6-7 man team plus the locals?
Well, the picture you had was handover. So okay. that at the time, during the majority of the deployment, it was just 3, 1, and me. So 5, just 5 of us. Majority of the time, and then the handover was the older guy was handing over to the younger guy that was with the agency, and then the green guys were staying, and then I was handing over to another Air Force guy.
So no armored vehicles, horseback.
No, it was well, whatever the Hiluxes, the little trucks, and Humvees wouldn't have made it on some of those routes we were on anyway. But it was just the local trucks that we bought, or who somebody bought. I don't know who bought it, but somebody bought it, and we lived in a little compound that we paid the locals to protect us with and stand guard for. And then when we ran out of roads, a lot of the smuggler routes that we were on to try to find him, you could only access on horseback. So we spent, I think we spent the longest, most of the time we'd take it out, the trucks out to there, stop, and then go on horseback to check the smuggler routes to try to find him. I think the longest we spent was maybe 3 weeks on horseback, but most of the time it was like a week or two on horseback and then come back.
Did you ever get into contact while on horseback?
No, we never. I mean, because we were, the locals were our security, so, and they had a lot of influence, so they kept most people off of our back at the time, and they were a lot of key people that ended up being on our hit list later. But we were just trying to get the protection of them. One cool thing that happened on that deployment is, I don't know if you ever saw the Afghan game where they take the dead goat and they take it from post to post on horseback, some of the horse soldiers.
Mm-hmm.
So they let us participate in it. And none of the other guys really wanted to do it, but I wanted to do it because I was young and dumb at that time. It's probably stupid. I could have fallen off and gotten killed. But I went out there and I played the game with them. I didn't do that great, but it was a lot of fun and it was cool. But at the end of it, when we're setting, they said that what they used to do is during the war with the Russians, they would play that same game with the heads of the Russians. And it was like, oh, well, that's kind of interesting. You're not planning on doing that with us, are you? I mean, because if they wanted to turn on us, there was only 5 of us, so we would have been screwed.
How many of them were there with you?
We had probably, I don't know, maybe 24, 30 fighters when we would go out on the trails. But for our personal detail security, maybe 6 or 10. So our goal was not to be very big. So it was, I think, 3 vehicles at most. And then on horseback, we had a lot more because we were on horseback and we had to pack out horses for our gear. In fact, after that deployment, one of my AARs was, hey, we need to take classes on packing out horses. I grew up with horses, so I knew how to ride horses, but I didn't do a lot of packing horses out. So a lot of that was just figuring shit out, which is in training why I would say, the best operators are guys that can overcome adversity and problem solve, because you're going to face something you've never seen before. And every deployment I faced something I never seen before, even on my later deployments. So a necessity for everyone is being able to overcome adversity and problem solve. You can be a ninja at all the shit that you want, but if you can't do those 2 things, you're going to find yourself in a situation that you may not be able to get your way out of, or get out of because of that.
So that was a recce deployment. Did another deployment at the 2-4 from there?
I did one more deployment after that, and then the rest of my deployments were at the regular line unit. Mm-hmm. And really, majority of my kills were from the regular line units. And the first deployment after I left there was 2006. That was probably one of my, was it 06, 07? 06, 07, and then 09, and then 12. But the 06, 07 is, I think that's the one where I got the 2 BSM with Vs. That one was like a killing spree. I mean, not that, we were out murdering people, but that's when there was still a lot of Taliban, a lot of strongholds. So you could go out and I Winchester to AC-130 on one of my outings. Wow. And 2 flights of F-18s in one of our firefights. It is the worst firefight I had gotten in. None of us should have survived, but it was. The Taliban owned this whole valley, and they sent in ISAFA. I probably shouldn't say it, but we used to call them I suck at fighting. But they sent in a whole conventional force to clear this, of a couple of hundred, to clear this valley. And they ended up getting all fucked up and pushed out of the valley. and the Afghanis that were with them got caught, like 2 truckloads of Afghanis got caught when they were exfilling, and we came in QRF, and I brought in a few aircraft to do low approaches, but I couldn't drop because I couldn't tell who was friendly and who was enemy. So I just tried to, break them off of pursuit until they could get to us, the conventionals, and then they got to us, and then we wanted to go back into the valley to grab the Afghans that were helping us that got cut off, but the conventional guys were all panicked because they got fucked up, and they're like, we're not going back in the valley. And so we had to come out of the valley and escort them back to the safe haven because they didn't have good air support. They didn't have a JTAC with them. And so then we got back, and then the Taliban sent the Afghanis that they caught back to our fire base with their eyes cut out, their ears cut off, and their lips cut off, back to us all dead. Oh, wow. And we're like, oh, okay. Oh, so you want us to come back in. So then our mission was to go find the ambush site, and then they were going to send in like 500 troops to where the ambush site was, which, we're all young and we're like, yeah, we're going to go find the ambush site. But when you really think about that, normally when you find the ambush site is when you're in the ambush site. So it wasn't really a real smart plan, but we're all, young, full of piss and vinegar, ODA guys. And so we went in. I think we were only, I think 24, maybe 30 people strong. So we weren't that big of a footprint. I mean, a fairly good sized footprint, but we brought guys from, motor pool to ride so that we could have max ODA on guns and us on guns. And I was at that time, they let us ride in the back of the Humvees. So I was in the back of the Humvee, and, it just wide open. And so we're slowly getting into this valley, and there's this choke point. I'm like, if I were going to do an ambush, I'd probably do it at that choke point. So I got a couple of flights of F-18s overhead, and then I put them downwind so that they couldn't hear them, to kind of provoke them to attack us so that we could engage them. Because if they heard aircraft, they usually didn't mess with you. So put them downwind, high and downwind, so they couldn't hear them. And then we eased into the valley, and we were hoping they would hit us and still have time to do something. But they hit us, and we should have all died. We just got lucky and didn't die, or blessed, whichever you want to believe. But they had 100 people drop in behind us so that we couldn't get out. 100 people drop in front of us so we couldn't push forward. And then they had 50 on each side of us. And then they had another 50 people that were in this this ravine that we're going to pop up and just sweep through and wipe us out, which was their plan that we found out later. And it was like it was raining bullets. There was so many bullets. My antenna got shot off. Our Humvees looked like Swiss cheese. We had maybe 4 or 5 people get shot, but nobody died, which was, in my mind, a miracle. But I caught a ricochet. I had my goggles off because I was using the binos to look in the high areas to try to look for spotters so I could drop on them. And then we got hit, and rounds were just going everywhere. And so I was temporarily blinded for a little bit because I caught a little powder dust from the round that impacted the top of the turret. So I couldn't see. So I just was talking to the aircraft, and I said, hey, made sure that they could still had visual on us. And I said, start strafing 50 meters on both sides of us until you're Winchester. So they just kept strafing both sides. I didn't know it at the time. We found out later. On that strafe is where they wiped out. They just shredded the 50 guys that were supposed to pop up and sweep through us. And I mean, pure luck or accident, because they didn't see the 50 guys. They were just sweeping the ravines on both sides of us and ended up smoking the dudes that we found out later after we went back in and, checked out the area. And then I finally, got a little blurry, and then I could see again. And then I just had them drop everything they had in front of us because I figured they were probably better set up for us to turn around. And it was so tight, it was hard for us to turn around. So I figured if if we wasted too much time turning around, that we weren't going to survive. We're going to all die. So I just had them drop everything they had in front of us to punch a hole through the 100 in front of us, and it made it enough to where we could punch a hole through the guys that were blocking us in front. And then once we got to the other side of them, that's when the dust, or it was dusk. So that's when nightfall started to come in. So then we had access to AC-130. So the AC-130 came overhead. We set up a wagon wheel. And I said, hey, I want to go back in because I don't want to go back through that shit. And the team leader was like, I ain't going back with you. And I said, well, give me an Afghani. So they gave me the Terp. And then I went to point advantage. I went outside of our perimeter and then got a good advantage of the valley, and then spent the whole night dropping AC-130, maneuvering and dropping AC-130, and cleared out the whole valley. Wow. Winchester, the AC-130, then came back. And they actually, I mean, I'd gotten in like a 48-hour straight firefight early in that deployment. And that's when they put me in for the first BSM with V. And then this one, they actually put me in for the Silver Star, but the Air Force downgraded it to BSM with V because they said I already got my deployment medal. I'm like, the first one wasn't a deployment, whatever. But it was more, the respect of the team. But I was able to clear out that valley, and then I came back to the team, and then we used a lot of technology, and we found where they were meeting to plan our reattack. The leadership was, and I dropped 2 500-pound bombs on the cave that they were doing, and 2 dudes ran out of the leadership team that was planning our reattack that we had gotten from different collective, collection things that we had access to. And all I had left to drop was hellfire from a predator. And so at the time, I picked the guy that was running uphill because I figured he was the stronger fighter, because one went uphill and one went downhill. Hindsight, I probably should have picked the one running downhill because he was probably the smarter fighter. But either way, after we did that, the Taliban in that area nicknamed us the Scorpions because we had tail gunners, and none of the conventional guys had tail gunners, but they left us alone. So we were able to move up into the valley of Gulistan, and we liberated the village. And I say liberated because the Taliban, when they came in there before us, they burned the schools and killed all the teachers and started re-educating the youth. So a lot of people don't understand the violence that were associated with them, and some of the the good stories that we have from over there. But we cleared that, and then we set up, and 2 days later, the 500 came in, and it was on the news like Fox and CNN. They're clearing the valley, liberating this valley. And they came, didn't even take a fire, and then got to us and finally relieved us when we were actually the ones that cleared the valley.
Wow. But, so when you brought that gunship in that night, did you get most of those 500 fighters?
Yeah, that's where I got the bulk of my kills.
Yeah.
I ended up getting my kill count up to, not that I'm some sick person, but we used to compete to see who got the most kills. But I think I got up to high 3s, low 4s. Wow. On that. Actually, it was the 376, I think, is what I got.
I mean, you literally changed the battlefield.
Yeah. Well, the AC-130 did.
Yeah, the AC-130.
I just told him where to shoot.
I mean, how many enemy fighters were in that area total? Was that 500 total?
Yeah.
So I mean, you basically just decimated.
Yeah. After that, there were no ambushes or attack for the rest of our deployment in that area.
That's crazy. I think that's what a lot of people don't understand, like the power of a JTAC, a controller. A lot of people they'll ask, like, why does Air Force have special operations? They don't really get it, but what you just said just basically explains why.
Yeah, because you had a couple of hundred conventional forces that got their ass kicked and got put on full retreat, which would not have happened if they didn't have air power. And I mean, if you just think about it, you can only carry so many guns. I mean, there's only so much ammunition and gunpowder you can carry on the ground. But when you add air power to it, I mean, as they rotate out and get refueled, rearmed, you have endless supply. So the ability to hold the enemy off when you have the air power multiplies your capability and your lethality, however many folds of the access to air you have.
Yeah.
So it's a huge game changer for any conflict that you're in. I mean, even when you start talking wargaming stuff, I've been involved in some wargaming stuff that's associated with different adversaries, and sometimes conventional guys get in the mindset it's going to take us 5 regiments to hold the enemy at bay and keep them from overwhelming us, and I've said, hey, why don't you put like 5 2-person JTAC teams on these key advantage points and then do precision airstrikes. You'll hold the same size at bay without risking the same number of people. They're like, oh yeah, no, because they want a job security. No, I gotta lead the 5 regiments of men. Like,
when you became a chief in E9, were you able to change any of those policies like that, or?
When I was in Okinawa, I was able to influence some of the battle plans to do a little bit of that, but reality is Army owns the battle space on the ground, and our leadership was more worried about owning battle space rather than trying to evolve with time. That's one thing. I never got it across the finish line, but when we started talking about hyper-enabled operator type stuff, my conceptual thought process was, instead of, in the mindset of having these 13-person ODAs or these, 12-person SEAL teams moving into this area, why don't you just pick and choose and have maybe a controller that controls the airspace and can bring air power if you get in trouble, and then you piecemeal soft teams to do what you need them to do in areas, so that you only have small 2 to 4-person teams going against our adversaries. Because when you start talking near peer, a lot of times they outnumber us, especially if they team up. I mean, not to say we're trying to start conflict with anyone, but if Russia and China decide to team up, we're outnumbered. That's the reality. And the way that their organizations or their countries are set up, they can focus all their money and revenue and outspend us, because the citizens have the majority of the money in America, not the government. I mean, we have a lot of money, but we can't focus as a government the amount of money that China can, because they control all their money. But what we can do is we can build relationships and we can spread out. Now, if you're doing that, we only have so many people, and you only have so many people in SOF, and you can't maneuver as these large entities of 14, 15 people and still have the influence and compete against somebody that outnumbers you 10 to 1 when they combine adversaries. But if we went out in onesies and twosies, then we could compete with them, and we could compete relationship-wise. Mm-hmm. We could be a better partner to allies. And, the common saying that a single stick by itself is easy to break, but when you have a group of sticks, it's hard to break. So if, we get out there and we become good friends with all the other countries that are out there, then we can build a coalition that can stand against people that want to move into areas and bully other countries. Like, if China wanted to move in against Taiwan, Taiwan can't stand against China without significant damage. And if we tried to stand against them, we'd have significant damage. But if you have a coalition of forces, then it makes China think twice before they want to do something. If, it's like us and a handful of other countries that are in that area. The same with, what's going on in Europe with Ukraine. If there's a coalition of forces and we stand together and say, hey, it keeps people from bullying other people, or countries from bullying other countries. Mm-hmm. And it takes that power away from them, because it's hard. And I think that's what China and Russia are doing, is they're trying to force their will onto neighboring countries or places that have created an independence from them. And that makes it difficult for anyone to stand solely against them. But if there was a coalition of forces, it keeps them from doing that. Because I think we're past that era in this world. The conquering time has passed. It should be more of a evolved, sophisticated society. If you want to take a country, then buy them, or go into negotiations to have them annexed. But the time of just going in and conquering countries, I think we should have evolved since then. And I know a lot of people don't want to see us getting into conflicts like that, but great power comes great responsibility. And you can't, I don't think we should stand by and watch bullies be bullies. If a country doesn't have the ability to stand up for itself, then I think we should help stand for them. If it's against somebody that just wants to go in and, execute or create chaos or just do violence or indiscriminate targeting. I mean, unpopular opinions in some realms, but I think we should be there in Ukraine, saying, hey, Russia, we ain't going to touch any of your assets in Russia, but if you're in Ukraine, free game. I support, if Palestinians wanted to have their own country, then don't go in and start executing kids and civilians. Like, there's a way to do that if you want your own country. But if you want to come in and just start executing kids and innocents, well, don't get mad when we stand, shoulder to shoulder with Israel and say, hey, go fuck off.
Not
to get into politics.
No. It shocks me when people I know that non-military, just friends, and they'll be like, I don't know what side to support. And I'm like, who crossed the border and killed civilians? Yeah. Who shot up a music festival?
Yeah.
And they're like, well, I hear, they're oppressed in their place. I'm like, but Israel's not flying over in hang gliders and shooting civilians at a music fest.
Yeah, if you want to target military installations and you want to start a legitimate conflict, then if two people want to fight, then two people want to fight.
Yeah.
If you're putting fighters against fighters. But if you're going in there and executing innocent people and civilians and non-combatants, well, great. I think it's our responsibility. I know people hate to say, we're not the world police. Well, if we have the power, why would we not push against inhumanity?
Yeah.
I mean, of any kind of violence against the innocent people. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I
don't think a lot of people understand, like, dudes, a lot of the guys on team, they're all about doing that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, that's literally like free the oppressed, the Green Berets, their motto.
Protect those that can't protect themselves.
Yeah.
Why would you not want to do that? I mean, you're raised on superheroes defending the people that can't defend themselves. But then when we go in to defend people that can't defend themselves, it's like, why are you in there defending people that can't defend themselves?
I think that's where all the politics and just people are going to say what they're going to say. They just don't.
Well, and people don't take the time to educate themselves.
That's the big thing.
Because like with the Israel and Palestinian situation, people don't take the time to educate themselves that Israel at one point was willing to provide an area that that Palestinians could call their own, that could be their home and their annex. But the Palestinians wanted more. Nope, we want all of it. It's like, well, you can't have all of it. You can have this section. No, we want all of it, or we're going to continue to, do terrorist attack, or we're going to continue to do attacks. And then, finally Israel's like, well, fuck you. That's like somebody comes to your house and you're like, hey, I feel bad for you. Here's some food. Well, I want your home. Well, you can't have my home, but I'll give you, you can have that corner of my lot, but I'm not going to give you my whole home. And so, but people don't correlate that relation that, they attempted to make some kind of agreement, a peaceful agreement, but the Palestinian entities didn't want that.
Did you ever work with the Israeli Special Forces?
I haven't. I've worked with ROMSOFT. I've worked with the Aussies. Australians are some of the hardest out of all soft entities in the world that I've ever worked with. The Australians, by far, some hard dudes. Like on some of our on one of my deployments where I was with them, insertions that we would have said, hey, let's take a helicopter or a vehicle because it was over a few ridge lines. The Australians were like, hey, let's just walk. I'm like, fucking walk? That's like 50 miles in the mountains. How about we just have a helicopter drop us off in a close proximity and walk 10 miles? But they were some of the hardest dudes. But I got to work with a lot of different entities, but not the Israelis, unfortunately.
Yeah. Did you ever get, were the Australians, the Aussies ever attached to the teams? Were they ever partner up?
Well, no, they had their own entity. So that was the cool thing about being a combat controller is you got to integrate with, I mean, I didn't get to go with the Brits, but I got to go with the Aussies on one rotation. But you got to, that's why I said, you get to integrate with all SOF entities. So any of our ally SOF entities,
rotation.
Yeah. So you get to integrate with other SOF entities. Now, most of them have their own JTACs, but in the beginning, when JTACs were, short on supply, we integrated with all the entities, which is why I'm not a big fan of us kind of giving up that role because we were the best in the world at it.
Yeah.
Like the Air Force was the best in the world at that particular mission. And now we tell the Army to make your own, tell the Navy make your own. And then other countries are making their own. And we give that up because some of the officers want us to be problem solvers or ground, just regular, I'm not regular soft dudes, but just shooters. And we already have shooters. We have entities that are the best in the world at it. And it's not us. But that's what it is.
So going back to that deployment, that's where you got the second Bronze Star. That first one was when you dropped on that house.
Yes.
Where the medevac was coming in.
That was the third one. That was the third Bronze Star.
Oh, that was the third Bronze Star.
With Valor was the dropping on the compound. The first one was a 48-hour fight. A couple of danger close drops when we were trying to get into an area. But the Taliban had taken out a few ANA and AMP stations. And so we went in to a village that was controlled by them. And then we got caught in the village and we were outgunned until that one I had four different flights and 2 of the flights were A-10s. So nice. The A-10s I dropped danger close and that is when we started turn the tide of the fight. But we were fighting for 48. I didn't sleep for 2 days. None of us slept for 2 days. And then finally we got out and another QRF team met us because they ended up maintaining control because they ended up pushing us out even with the air. It was just too many. They shot up a couple of vehicles. So we were towing 2 vehicles and we were down to 2 functioning vehicles. So we finally got to the QRF team 2 days later, and then they took over, and I slept for a day. And that was when we got the first one. But we were caught right outside the village, and they almost overtook us, but the aircraft kept them from overtaking us. So that was the first.
Do you remember how close you dropped with those A-10s?
50.
50 yards? 50 meters?
50 meters. Wow. So it was close enough that the dust, because we were in kind of a defilade, that the dust came over us from the bombs, and there was quite a bit of vibrations from it.
So, doing gun runs too?
Doing gun runs. Those weren't as bad because I did them perpendicular or parallel to us, and then some of them off my shoulder kind of thing. But the bombs are when they got pretty close. But after the A-10s did that, then it was pretty much a distance then. So then we figured out that we needed to withdraw. There was just too much for us. So we withdrew and the aircraft covered our withdrawal until we could get out of the controlled area, which took us a couple of days to get out of.
Wow. Was that, you were at 2-3 at that time?
I was at 2-3.
2-3? That's wild. Well, let's take a quick little break and then we'll get back into it after that.
Sweet.
Yeah. Hey everyone, if you're liking the Howard Show and the episodes, make sure you please like, subscribe, and follow it. Please share it to your social media account. We're gonna have merchandise coming out soon, and we're gonna be selling some commercial space on the episode. So please help support us because my videographer, Randy, he needs money. He's got a lot of kids, and he's got a massive drug problem. So please buy the merchandise and like, subscribe, and follow. Thank you. Okay, we're back from the break. So our real good friend, Adam Cooper, he told me to ask you about why you had to do your Carl G in and out of Gold Team.
So it's funny you asked that. We started the Carl in and Carl out because the deployment that I went on right before we built Gold Team, the ROEs were really, really strict. The rules of engagement were really strict. In fact, it was the one where the guy got killed because we couldn't drop on the compound. So what I started doing is I started taking a Carl Gustav, which is a 84 millimeter like rocket launcher. I mean, it has a breech and you can load rounds into it and close it. And it comes with all different kinds of rounds. The one that I liked the most was the proximity round because you could set it to a certain distance and then it would air burst or it burst on contact. One of the two, but I like the air burst option the most. So on that deployment, when the ROEs, the rules of engagement, were so strict, I started carrying it and having the aircraft call my rounds. So when we would take fire from compounds, I would shoot it, or if we took rounds from the covered positions, I would shoot it to the distance, and then the aircraft would tell me, hey, that's long and high. So I'd adjust the aiming point, I'd adjust the proximity on the round, then I'd shoot it. It goes, okay, Shaq, you got that guy, and then I'd move on to the next guy. So on that deployment, I ended up getting 17 kills, but my first kill that I got, the ODA I was with made me a beer mug, or made a mug out of it, beer mug because that's what you drink out of it, but made a mug and stamped 1 KIA on it. So because of that, that one was the one that we brought to Gold Team and became the Carl in, Carl out. And we said, you're drinking the souls of your enemy because they made me a beer mug. So that's the one that's at the team, and that's one that I left for the tradition. But on that same deployment, another reason why, and this mug I kept, we were catching fire and they were in covered positions. They were bounding from tree lines to ditches to mud walls, and they had us surrounded, and we were kind of trapped in this compound for a couple of days just fighting, and it was in the Huhman. Everyone knows the Huhman. So the plan was I had the Carl and the ODA guys were set up, and we were trying to get these to flush the guys out. So I was going to shoot around close to where they were and air burst it. And then when they bounded from their cover, then the ODA guys were going to smoke the guys that were bounding around us and shooting and throwing grenades and RPGs. Well, I shot the round, and as I shot the round, the two enemy guys bounded and they crossed. And right as they crossed, it air bursted over them and killed both guys. And so obviously there was no skill involved with it, if I'm being honest. But, if I get drunk, then I'll say it was all skill. But I looked at the ODA guys and I was like, holy shit, did you see that? Yeah. And they're like, oh, fuck you. But they were kind enough to keep the round, and they stamped 2 KIA on it. And that's the one that sits on my mantle at home. So I kept that one. But yeah,
that's awesome. And you were telling me the story about the one guy that walked in the doorway as soon as you fired that Carl G.
So that was actually I ended up getting over my whole career 18 kills, but my very first kill was the one when we were going through that valley and we got ambushed. So after I directed the aircraft to punch us a hole in the front. And they were on, I told them just is type 3, keep engaging until they were Winchester. When you're deployed, the stupid things to help keep your sanity, I was like, ooh, I've never killed anyone with this Carl Gustav. And as a first, I shot it in training a couple of times, but I had it in the back of the Humvee with me. And I just brought it because I thought, well, maybe. So I pulled it out and I was like, oh, I'm going to get a Carl kill. And the guy in the turret kept yelling at me, dude, sit down. What are we going to do if our JTAG gets killed? Sit the fuck down. I was like, no, I want to get a kill with the Carl. I want to get a kill with the Carl. Sit down. So we were arguing a little bit, and then finally I got him like, hey, I'll hit this hut, because this guy kept shooting RPGs from this little mud hut. I was like, I'm just going to shoot it through the door and smoke whoever's in there. And he's like, well, hurry up. So I got it all set up. I stood up in the Humvee, bullets shooting all around us. And I shot it. And right as I shot it, a guy stepped into the doorway and it hit the guy and it just was red mist. And I was like, holy shit, did you see that? Another lucky event, which is where I spent all my luck. Like it's funny because people say, are you lucky? I'm like, no, not really. Because I'll put, if there was a hat drawing, I could buy 5 numbers and there'd be 6 numbers in there and I would not get picked. But I didn't get killed and I never got shot. So I spent all my luck on the battlefield.
I mean, it's pretty incredible that you never got a Purple Heart, never got wounded, nothing like that.
The closest was that RPG that blew up over my head and ended up killing both guys next to me. But I was just in that dead space. I got a TBI, but not.
Yeah. Wow, that's crazy. So actually, so you said 17 Carl G kills in that deployment?
On that deployment. And then the first one, the very first one was the other deployment I had, was my very first Carl kill.
That's got to be a record. I've never heard people.
Yeah, 18.
And you're only supposed to fire how many Carl G rounds? Because of the overpressure?
I think like 3. The first deployment, I stuck to the rule. I didn't shoot more than 3. The second deployment, I'd have the commandos carry the round, and I had my M4 slung up like you have it for rappelling, and I'd come out of the helicopter or out of the vehicle when we'd go on patrols carrying the car Gustav. And the ODA thought I was crazy as fuck for doing it. They're like, what's wrong with you? But
is this where you were a Master Sergeant?
Yeah, I was a Master Sergeant. Because I had the first kill, and it was and the ROEs were so strict, and so with the Carl, it ended up getting us out of a lot of pinches, because between that and the mortars, because the other guys carried the 60, and we spent a lot of time in the Hellman. The Hellman's a bit of a shit show, and every time you go in there, it's a fight until you leave. Every time you insert in, so that helped a lot of times when they weren't letting us drop aircraft. They would go at it with the mortars, and then I'd go at it with the Carl.
Wow. Did you do any dropping on that one too? That deployment?
The only time I dropped was when I leveled that compound, because if you couldn't clear the compound, but then again, if you cleared the compound, then I don't need to drop anymore. But anyway, the logic in it just didn't make any sense. But if it was a compound, then you couldn't drop on it. If it was a school or church, you couldn't drop on it. So the enemies knew the rules, and so they used all those as cover so that they could attack you and smoke all of us, and we couldn't drop on it. So they took our air out of the fight, because everybody, the politicians were so worried about how things looked that our lives were less important than the human shields that the enemy were using.
Yeah.
Which, yeah. I mean, it is what it is. You feel bad. You don't want any innocent person to die. But like what I would always tell my team is, I won't lose a wink of sleep taking somebody's life to ensure that we all go home to our families. Whether that's somebody that they're using as a shield or not. I feel bad for it, but I mean, what are you going to do? Give your life up and let them kill you because they're putting shields in front of them because they know that we won't drop or do anything to them? I mean, at every extent possible, you'd try to avoid it, but not at the risk or jeopardy of our lives and us not going home to our families.
Yeah, no, war's nasty. So
yeah, people think it's all patty cakes and there's rules. The only people that follow the rules are us. The enemy doesn't follow any enemy we've been against. For the most part in recent conflicts, they don't follow the rules.
Yeah, absolutely. So you were telling me during the break, I wasn't aware of it, but you started that Ruck Memorial March from San Antonio, Texas to here at Hurlburt Field, Florida.
I did. So I wasn't the good idea fairy. If anyone knows Sam Schindler, I always call him a good idea fairy because a good idea. But he's a good idea fairy. If you ask him to do the logistics and everything that's needed to make it come to fruition, he's not bad at it, but he's also not very good at it. But that's why we worked well together, is because I'm very good at like detail planning and getting all the little intricate stuff associated with it. But we were sitting drinking, don't do that very often, but we were drinking one day, and we were trying to figure out a way how we could honor the guys that we had lost downrange. And the first Memorial March ended up being the Tim Davis Memorial March because he loved rucking. He just loved to ruck. So the idea was, hey, let's do a Memorial March for Tim Davis because he loved rucking. And so then him and I sat and we're like, well, how can we really make it significant and worth the sacrifice he made? Because you don't want to just go for a 5-10 mile ruck and say, oh, I rucked for you, It want to be something that made you like, holy shit, this is a good kick between the legs. So we're like, hey, why don't we start in San Antonio, because that's where our pipeline starts for our training to be a combat controller, and special tactics, because same for PJs and the other career fields, and then finish at Hurlburt Field because that's STTS, that's where we all graduated and we finished the pipeline. So that's why we went Herbie to, from San Antonio to Herbie. So that's the idea. The first year I tried to get support from the Air Force to at least let us do permissive TDY, or to sponsor us to kind of help with the coordination, but nobody wanted to help partake in it or help support it, because at that time there wasn't a lot of things done for the fallen because it was fairly early in 2000. So a bunch of guys, we just took leave and we paid out of pocket, and we coordinated with some recruiters to help, facilitate some interaction. And then I did all the mission planning with it. Sam helped a little bit, but not a lot. And I say that because the first Memorial March, I missed a day. And what that means is we had to haul ass, because what I thought, I had us arrive in a day earlier than we actually would have, because I skipped a whole day. So I had us arrive in a day earlier than we actually were on pace to arrive. So we had to haul ass for a couple of iterations and make up a whole day to get there, because the way we set it up was a relay walk. Somebody was always walking for 24 hours a day for, I think it took us like 5 or 6 days to get there. That was the first year. Once we got about halfway through, then Fox News and CNN caught wind of it, and they interviewed me and interviewed Sam, and then the Air Force wanted to be a part of it. Imagine that. But then after that, the Air Force got on board, and they wanted to be more of a part of it. But what we evolved it to was, after we did it for Tim Davis, then we wanted to do it for everyone. So the concept was we made these wooden batons, and we engraved each guy's name on the baton. And the first year, or the second year actually, we passed every one of those batons over to the team that was walking. So they carried all the batons the whole way. And then after that, what it evolved to was, if we lost somebody, then we would do the Memorial March, and every team would have a baton of a member that had already made the march, but the one who passed that never made it would be the baton that was passed to each person. So that's where the idea of it came. And then now it's evolved to, it's managed by public affairs and done by, whoever does it now.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. I remember the first time seeing that, and it was just really cool to see that. Are you still involved? Do you still do the ruck and all?
I ask them anytime they do it to let me know, to kind of allow us to be a part of it. And if I think I've only missed, well, I won't get into it. One of them I missed because they never even told me that they were doing it, so I was a little bitter on that one. But the rest of them, I only missed 2 other ones of that, and it was because I was either TDY or deployed and I couldn't get out of it. But every one of the other ones I've made. I only missed 2. I didn't miss 3. I've only missed 2. One because they didn't tell me, and one I couldn't make it back.
I'm trying to remember what time of year they do that.
It's different each time. So usually it's they only do it if we lose somebody.
Yeah.
So if we lose somebody, so then they start the planning for it, and then it'll occur based off of when we lost somebody.
Yeah. I've actually always wanted to do it because they passed through my hometown in Texas. When they
nice.
did. Yeah.
Where?
It's called Mauriceville, Texas.
Yeah.
But it's right on the border of Louisiana, right by Orange.
Yeah.
Orange, Beaumont area.
Yeah.
So
we had huge support in that area. Huge support.
I remember, I want to say I was deployed the year they went through there, but I was telling my friends from like high school in town, like, hey, like go out there, just bring some water bottles, bring out some little snacks or something, like just say hey to the boys.
Yeah, it was the first year was. Now it's a lot more regimented, and because the media and people want to have a certain image. But the first year we did it, people would line up the roads, and they'd be like, the local station would hear about it, and they'd come out and cheer us, and here, have a beer, and we'd chug a beer and drink a little bit. In fact, when we got to Orange Beach on the other side of Pensacola, I don't know which one of us. It was me or my rucking partner. I don't know which idea it was, but one of our ideas was we're gonna go in the bar, we're gonna have a drink with everyone, and maybe do a shot, and then get back on it. And we had like a 14-mile leg, and it was 50 pounds is what we had in there, but most people had 60 just because of water. We started 50 base weight, and then you add water to it. So the rucks weren't like crazy heavy, but they weren't light. So after about 3 or 4 bars of doing that, I can't remember if it was Sam or Bruce Dixon that I was a partner with that year. My sometimers. Sometimes I remember, sometimes I don't. But I looked at him, I was like, I can't do another shot or I won't finish this ruck. Because we'd go in and we'd drink a beer and bullshit with the people, and then we'd chug it, and then we'd do a shot, and we'd go to the next one. But after the 3rd bar, I was like, if we keep doing this, I'm not going to be able to finish. Because it's also after walking for 5 days straight, so we were smoked.
Yeah, it wasn't. Is it Floribama? It wasn't that?
Floribama.
Was it Floribama?
It was Floribama area. Yeah.
that bar is pretty neat.
Yeah.
I've only been there I think twice ever, but it's pretty cool.
Yeah. When I was really young, first got in the Air Force, it was before it was all built up. It was just a hole in the wall bar there. You could go to the local drop zone, and the last lift ticket, you jumped on the beach out there, and then you got a free pitcher of beer.
Oh, no.
So we would go out there, and we'd do the last lift, get the free pitcher of beer, and then drink at Floribama. And then that's when it's just out in the middle of the woods. So it's pretty cool.
That is awesome. That is awesome. So what year did you make E8? Was that like 14, 15?
You know what? I'd have to look at the. I'd have to look at that bio.
I remember when you were a team sergeant goal team, and then I think after that's when you left.
Yep.
And you kind of went to more of like leadership roles and stuff like that.
Yeah, I got into an argument with a chief. Well, it was kind of stupid, so I'll tell the story. I just won't tell names. But Emerald Warrior, that everybody's quite familiar with, was coming around, and I said, hey, instead of us always getting tagged with this at the last minute, let's get into it in the very beginning so that we can influence what we do, because we always got tagged with it. We always said, we're not doing it. And then at the last minute, they're like, you're doing it. And then we would do it, and it'd be a waste of training because they already made what we were doing, but they never had any ST planning what we were doing, so we were doing stupid shit. So I wanted to do it. The commander at the time said, I think it's a waste of time. I don't think we should do it, but it's your call. And I said, well, okay, then I'm going to do it. So I did it. And then we're at the final stages of planning, and I talked about we had a pretty cool training plan. We were going to go out with the SEALs and do some stuff. We're going out with FBI to do some stuff. We're going out with ODAs and doing like ST stuff. And it was all paid for by the exercise, none of our unit budget. And so I'm briefing it, and the commander goes, I thought I said I'd rather us not do it. I said, but you also said it's my choice. And so I set it up. He goes, okay, fair enough, and left it alone. And then the chief at the time, and I won't say his name, whatever, he's kind of a tool. Didn't do anything in his career but a bunch of admin shit. But anyway, I mean, if he watches this, he'll know who he is. But he said, hang on a minute, and Mike West was with me in the VTC, He said, hang on a minute, just stay behind. And so it's me and Mike West and the chief, and the commander left, and he goes, I want you to be ready for your Article 15 when I return. And I said, Article 15 for what? He goes, disobeying a direct order. I was like, I didn't disobey a direct order. He goes, well, insubordination. I said, insubordination for what? He goes, the commander said he'd rather not do it. I said, but he said it was my decision. He goes, yeah, well, you should have took the hint and you should have followed orders. I said, it was my decision. He goes, well, you better be ready for your Article 15. I said, well, let's go for it. And I said, because I'm going to request court-martial because this is bullshit and you can go fuck yourself, which legally I did fuck myself by saying that. I mean, he didn't charge me with that because then it was insubordination, but you can only do that really legally with an officer, not another enlisted. But anyway, so 2 weeks later, I was in a staff job at the wing. See, that's how I left the 2-3, which was bullshit.
This is why everyone loved you, though, because you were a team guy with rank. Like, you literally were. I remember not even that long ago, you were E9. We were at the bar, and you got in a bar fight. And I was like,
what you talking about?
I was like, the highest ranked guy here got in a bar fight, like.
Well, since he brought it up, I'll tell the story because
you don't have to tell the story.
Well, I'll tell it to legitimize myself a little bit. I mean, I won't go incriminate myself, but I will tell a little bit of the basis. So I'm not just some crazy guy that likes to go bar fight. We had a member that was killed downrange, and his sister. We every year on the anniversary of us losing him, we go and have drinks at his graveside. My oldest son served and died while he was serving in the Air Force. Well, he's buried like right across the street from where, I won't say names because then everybody knows who it is. So right across there's a street that separates them, but both at the same national cemetery. So, and his birthday is August 26th. So every year I go and drink to my teammate, and I go visit my son that died while serving. Well, so this particular year, yes, I was still I was in E9, maybe not the best decision making, but let me justify my actions. Well, I'll give the information and then you can decide whether it's justified or not. So we're at the cemetery and my buddy's mom says, hey, can I talk to you for a minute? And I said, yeah. And she said, can you take my buddy that was killed downrange, sister, to the memorial? And we go out to Coasters and toast them because there's a memorial wall for everyone, as you know, just for the listeners so that they know. There's a memorial wall there honoring the guys that we lost downrange. So I said, yeah, why? And she goes, well, she's just having a tough time. And I said, well, what's going on? And she goes, well, I want to tell you something, but I don't want you to overreact. I'm like, well, sure, just tell me. And she goes, well, I've had to pick her up from the hospital twice because her boyfriend's put her in the hospital. And I go, maybe that's not what you should tell me because, that our type people, we take care of our own, especially this particular guy because my last deployment I was on, he was on the deployment with me, and we promised each other if something happened to me, then he was going to take care of my family. If something happened to him, then I would look after his family. I mean, the same deal that we all make with each other. So it made it a little tough. I said, yeah, I'll pick her up. So then I pick her up. We're driving to Coasters to go celebrate, and she gets a phone call, and it's this guy, and they're arguing back and forth. And I'm just sitting there. I'm like, okay, just stay calm, stay calm. She gets off the phone, and she goes, he's going to come tonight. I'm like, you think that's a good idea? That's probably not a good idea. And she goes, no, he's going to be fine. I love him. Can you just give him a chance? And I was like, all I want to do is do to him what he did to you. And she goes, no, just please, I love him. Can you give him a chance for me? And so I said, I'll give him a chance. But if he lays hands on you, I can't promise you anything. So we're at the bar. He comes in. I try to be the better person. I walk up to him to shake his hand. I said, hey, welcome. And he goes, I ain't shaking your fucking hand. And I go, okay. So then I go to the bar and I talk to one of our teammates and I said, hey, I can't drink anymore. I'll do the shot for our teammate, but I can't drink anymore. I'm going to fuck this dude up. And he goes, okay, why? What's going on? And I explained to him. He's like, oh, I'm going to go fuck him up. I'm like, no. I promised her we'd give him a chance. Let's just give him a chance. And so we're going on the night. We're drinking. They're drinking. He's getting fucked up. She's getting fucked up. Then we come time to toast our teammates. So we're handing out the shots. And I said, hey, we're going to toast our teammates. And he goes, we're fucking leaving. I said, hey, we're about to toast her brother. Let's toast her brother. I haven't been drinking. I'll drive y'all to get something to eat. And then I'll take you both home. No issues. He goes, no, we're fucking leaving. All these dudes in here just want to fuck her. And I'm like, dude, these are her brother's teammates celebrating his life. You're being an asshole. And he goes, I'm fucking taking her right now, and grabbed her hard enough to bruise her. I blacked out. May have gotten into a little bit of a tussle and then had to, run away before the cops got there.
He deserved it. He did. I mean, I was there. I remember watching the whole thing, and I remember someone said, like, I think someone, like, should we stop it? And I was like, I'm not stopping Ken. I was like, you just let Ken do his thing, But that's why
Jiu-Jitsu. Use Jiu-Jitsu.
That's why the guys loved you. I mean, you're a team guy with rank, because I mean, you've seen it. A lot of guys get the rank and they change.
Oh, yeah.
You were that guy the whole way through, even as an E9. You actually were the functional, right? Weren't you the functional?
When I retired, I was the AFSOC Functional Manager for our career field.
What was I remember seeing some articles. I remember reading it, but is it human performance? You did like some kind of medical type stuff.
So I fractured my L4 and L5 on a static line jump. Go figure. Static line jumps, they're so soft landings, actually, that you land like a bag of shit. But on this particular jump, some guy on the drop zone thought we really needed a static line, which you never really need a static line. So he called the winds lower than they actually were because he thought we needed a static line. And I ended up hitting the runway and I fractured my L4 and L5. And I was injured bad enough that I actually thought that I was going to get kicked out of the career field. In fact, I paid for my own x-rays out in town and never gave them to the military because I didn't want to get kicked out of the career field. And then that's slowly when POTIF was coming online, several years after that. So I got in with POTIF and they got me into the Andrews Institute and they put me through rehab. And then through the rehab, we brought in University of Pittsburgh to figure out better ways to train and rehabilitate operators. So they used me as a part of the study to see, how to bring somebody from a significant injury back up to full operations. And then they named it Human Weapon System since, my last name's Human, but then it was a play on words, but they didn't use, my last name, they took out the H. But so they called it the Human Weapon System, and they did this whole online video thing talking about how they measured our movement patterns and our fitness levels and where they could see, where injuries existed and how they could identify existing injuries, and then how they could use physical therapy and fitness and nutrition to rehabilitate us so that, back before all this happened, you got injured like I did, you either rode a desk or you had to cross train or you got out. I mean, you couldn't do the job anymore. But with, our efforts to put in time into POTIF and into this, our maintenance crew, as you could translate it for an air crew, because a lot of times they're like, why do they get all this special stuff? Well, you have a maintenance crew for the airplane. Well, we're the airplane. So they stood up this POTIF entity, which is what helped me get back on team, because at the time I didn't think I was ever going to be able to operate again because my back was at a point to where I couldn't train like I used to. I was getting fat because I have an internal fat kid. Some people work out because they like to be in shape. I work out because I like to eat. So when I wasn't able to work out and I was still liking to eat, I was getting a little fat and I was getting out of shape, and then it made it harder to get back in shape and things were hurting more because that was just, one injury. Your shoulders are all messed up, your knees are all messed up. So, but with the POTIF, I was able to get back into fighting shape, and they showed me things to tweak so that I could build the stabilizing muscles to be able to function even with significant injuries.
That's awesome. And that's when you got to meet Dustin, right? So that was like kind of a good benefit of
it. As part of a benefit. Well, it's funny because a part of that also, the UFC sponsored a bunch of guys to go out and meet UFC fighters and train with UFC fighters. And this, I'm an old crusty shit at this time. I was like a senior, maybe E8 or E9. I may even been an E9 at the time when I was really doing the rehab stuff for the second time. But nobody wanted to go out there and train with the fighters. I think, as you know, the operator insecurity, because we're all like, well, I don't want to go get my ass kicked. But I'm too stupid. I'm like, yeah, that'd be cool. I want to go get my ass kicked.
Volunteer for everything.
Yeah, volunteer for everything. So I volunteered to go out there, and we ended up, we were just doing workouts with them and training sessions, and then Dustin, Poirier, he's like, hey, does anyone want to roll? And I was like, man, yeah, I'd love to roll with you. And everyone else went in there before me. I went last, 30 seconds, and I lasted 2 minutes and 53 seconds, and then I got my ass kicked, but I lasted 2 minutes and 53 seconds. He was probably taking it easy on me too, but...
Is there going to be a rematch one day?
Yeah. I'd love to roll with him. He's phenomenal. He did teach me a couple of things that I've changed my game on, that I get people on all the time. Just a different way to hold a guillotine, which is, if I would have known the grips that he had, because I caught his neck for a moment. If I'd have known the grips, he wouldn't have been able to escape the way he did. But I didn't know the grips. Yeah. And that's why he's, he's obviously way more skilled than I was.
That's what an amazing experience.
Yeah.
And once we're done here, I think we're going to crack open some of his, some of that bourbon.
I would love to.
Yeah. He's, did that for the First Air Foundation. Like, it's pretty awesome. He's a great guy.
He is one of the most humble guys I've ever met, because you'd think, like, some of these fighters, you'd meet them and they'd, be full, big heads and think they're holier than thou or better than everyone else. But he was a very grounded, very polite, very nice guy, very humble, especially as skilled as he is. And it was great.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Do you do any other work with like foundations or things like that?
First there. I try to I'm trying right now to get the company that I work with right now to sponsor them next year. So we're working on that. Obviously, the Combat Control Foundation, I always go out and support them as much as I can. And then the Recon Foundation, anytime they have events, I go out and I help support them. Because they'll come down to this area and they bring wounded Recon Marines and just take them out on pontoons and boats and the beach. So I come down and I help as much as I can help with that when I can.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I know Jiu-Jitsu is really big to you. You just got a purple belt here recently.
Yeah, 9.5 years as a blue belt. I was trying to get my higher tenure. No,
that's awesome. Would you say, obviously 30 years of service, tons of combat, probably got some stressors, probably a lot of TBIs. Would you say that's been like a good outlet, or was that one of your outlets?
So it is one of my outlets. Jiu-Jitsu has probably been probably something that saved me from doing a lot of stupid shit. Especially, not to get too much in downer, but my second divorce was a shit show with my kids. I ended up getting full custody afterwards, but there was a point in time that there was a lot of accusations, and Jiu-Jitsu is what kept me from doing stupid shit. And I'd like to, do a shout out to Capital and Valor, because, I was at rock bottom. I spent ridiculous amount of money on defense lawyers. And then, over time, it was proven that all the lies were lies. And I ended up getting my kids full time. But it took a lot of money to get through that. And I didn't have, I was left with pretty much nothing. And they took me in and took care of me. But that outlet and that training kept me from doing, probably some stupid stuff.
Yeah.
So that's been a huge, huge thing. And believe it or not, another thing that's starting to catch a little bit of traction, microdosing.
Yeah.
I did a retreat, ayahuasca and different, plant-based medicine retreat, and it was life-changing for me. I mean, I'll talk a little bit about it, but it's sometimes I may pause a little bit on it, but pointing thing. But so my first experience on it, I lost my son, my oldest son. He passed away. So my first experience on it, I got to see him, and we found him in a river. Is where we ended up finding him. The situation was his apartment. The door was kicked open. His house was overturned, and then we found him 45 days later in a river. The first experience I had was I was falling with him, and then I was in the water, the cold water, and I could feel his fear. And then I touched him and took his fear from him. And then he looked at me and told me, Dad, I'm giving you a son because I want you to be happy. I say that because I unexpected pregnancy at 49 with my fiance, phenomenal woman. But we didn't know what sex it was at the time. And so I got to spend time with him and put to rest a lot of things that I had struggled with. It helped me get through a lot of things. And then later in that evening, I got to spend some time with teammates and get some resolution. I want to do another one because I didn't get all the resolutions of the things that we struggle with on team. I think I'm still somewhat grounded, but there's still things you struggle. And then my oldest daughter, not to get too political, I'm kind of middle right. I'm not extreme right or extreme left. My daughter has been extreme left for a little while. She went to college, came back extreme left. So we've had some struggle on some seeing eye to eye on some things and communicating. So my second experience during that retreat was her and I sat and talked about some things that she was struggling with. And then I came home and talked to her about the things that I experienced, and she started crying and said those are the things that she's been wanting to tell me but never knew how to tell me. And now we have a good relationship.
Yeah.
So, and then since then, the microdosing just to kind of even kill. I used to get, like I couldn't look at bright lights from my TBI without getting a really bad headache and needing to turn off the lights. Now I can actually look at lights. I don't get the headaches from the lights anymore. And I'm starting to, I don't know, it's hard to explain what the experience is like. Anytime I do the microdosing or the plant-based medicine to retreat, it's almost like I go into the library and I'm reorganizing my books. Yeah. And it helps me understand some of the things that just get in my head and I just circle, trying to find resolution. It helps me organize my library better is the best way I can correlate it to. And that is a huge thing with First Air. I mean, they're the ones that hooked me up with that, and I would have never known it. So I'm a big advocate for First Air because they're willing to do things for operators that some of the more established foundations are a little leery of doing because it's like, well, the science hasn't supported this, and everybody thinks, if it isn't pharmaceutical, then it's bad. But there's a lot of things out there that aren't pharmaceutical that have proven to be very beneficial. And this particular item, it's going to be hard for anybody to convince me that this is a really bad thing because I haven't personally seen anything but huge benefits from it from me and then other people that I've seen go to it. Like one of the guys that went to the retreat, he was on like 18 or 20 different medications, pharmaceutical medications, and now he's microdosing and on like 1 or 2 different medications and better than he's been in nearly a decade. So I don't know, things like that are something that I don't know. I don't even know how I got down this rabbit hole,
No,
but
you know,
it's a huge benefit
I'm
for
so glad
operators.
you brought it up. I'm very vocal about plant medicine. I've never done the ayahuasca. It's something I want to try, but I've done, psilocybin mushrooms,
Yep.
and just like what you said with psilocybin, it changed my life. It, I like how you said organizing like your bookcase again. I like that. I've never heard that said before. But for me, always tell people it's like dental floss for your brain.
Yeah.
You're going there and you're just scrubbing the plaque off. Any kind of past trauma, it doesn't matter if it was 10, 20, 30 years ago,
Yep.
you're going to get exposed to it all and you're going to come to terms with it and you're going to be okay with it. And I remember my first mushroom trip I did. Um, I literally thought I had traveled for 20 years. When I was coming out of it, about 2, 3 hours later, I was telling my wife and my friends that were there, a couple of controllers, I was apologizing like I've been gone for 20 years. I got so much I want to tell you, and that was just like how much information I had
Yeah.
processed from past to present to future, and it stopped all my bad habits. We kind of talked about this a little bit earlier, but I don't really drink alcohol much anymore. It's very little that I drink. I'll drink a
Yep.
little bourbon here and there. I cut back. I stopped taking like powdered pre-workouts. I
Yep.
used to take 2 scoops every workout. I would take scoops in the morning. I stopped being on my phone so much. When
Yep.
I came out of that trip, I felt this pain in my leg, and it was like super. It hurt, and I reached in my pocket, and when I pulled my phone out, the pain stopped, and I just heard this voice that said, "Stop using this thing so much; it's going to kill you." And I literally just dropped the phone. Um, any kind of bad habits I was doing, it was like a mirror was right in my face, and it just showed me everything that was wrong. And if I continued doing that, this is where I was going to end up.
Yep.
It was almost like that movie. I think it was called A Christmas Carol,
Yeah.
like where you go with the ghost brings you to all these like different
Yep.
things. It was almost like that. And I think it's everything you almost know, but it just really brings it right into your face. And I should say, what got me into it was I saw a lot of our teammates. They did it and talked about it. Guys that had real bad TBIs, and I never really knew anything about it. I was kind of like, what? Like mushrooms, psychedelics? Like that
Yeah.
wasn't really like a thing we did. It was like beer, whiskey, stuff
Yeah.
like that.
Same here.
So I was kind of like, well, that's interesting, but hey, I'm down to try it. And just a couple dudes sitting around, and I tried it, and I could not believe how much that one night. Yeah, I did a lot of like just mental health therapy, and I did more in that probably 4 hour period than I had ever done in 4 or 5 years of therapy.
Yeah.
And after that, I that's why I went very vocal about it, where I was telling people like, hey, look, if you got issues, this is something you might want to think about trying.
And I've told people that if you don't, if you're worried or you're concerned, do it in a controlled environment.
Yeah.
But I've never heard of anybody having a bad experience unless it's, mixed with something else. But the amount of resolution, I mean, I wish I could articulate it as well as you just did. All I can say is people have to try it, and then you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, because it resolved things that I didn't think I could ever resolve with myself.
Yeah.
And like you said, and I didn't really think it puts a mirror on you and allows the spotlight to see the things that you struggle with. And I don't like to call them imperfections, just because it has a negative connotation to it, but it's just things that you could make better.
Yeah. It shows you a better path.
Yes.
I've never had anything negative from doing psilocybin ever.
Nope.
My wife's done it. Same. She's actually where she saw some of her previous family members, even one of our dogs. Very very positive. It gave her closure. And that was a big thing. It gave her closure. She was okay with it. And I've heard that from a lot of people that have lost people, where they actually spoke to them and got that closure they needed. So
Well, that's what it did for me.
I think it's huge. And there's no way anyone's going to convince me that taking a mushroom from cow shit, literally a dried mushroom, is worse than taking a pharmaceutical drug made outside the United States.
Yeah.
Because like I've gone to mental health, I've done the VA route where they're like, here, you need like 7 different types of medication. This will make you happy. I felt like a dead zombie.
Yeah.
Like, I felt completely dead. And on mushrooms, it opened my mind to a whole nother level that I didn't know was even possible.
Yeah. I could see things more clearly. I respected life and nature more. It took a lot of my anger away because I had a lot of just I quick fuse. I would quick fuse. Well, I mean, case in point, in a bar fight. But now I it's easier for me to pause and reflect because I've always had a little bit of a temper, but after everything that you experience, your temper gets a little worse and a little worse, a little worse. But I was just very short fused on a lot of things, but it allowed me this self-reflection to be able to pause a moment
Yeah.
and maybe look at things a little deeper than what the initial interpretation of whatever the situation may
Yeah.
think it to be.
It made me a lot happier.
Yeah,
A
me
lot
too.
happier. I was pretty bitter and angry when I got out of the military. And although I had my business that was doing really good, I still had a lot of just like hate built inside, a lot of
Yeah.
anger. And it was like I actually remember it. I felt this like I always had this kind of like tightness in the back of my head. Especially actually when I see bright lights like headlights.
Yeah.
I felt this tightness. And I actually remember on my second mushroom trip, I felt it pop. It felt like it felt like a big pimple popped in the back of my head. And my neck rotated better. I could rotate my neck fully. And I just felt this like warm, it's like someone just poured hot water on me.
Yeah.
And I felt so happy. I felt so good. That's why I'm always in nature.
Yeah.
Like, that's why I bought that camera for taking photos. I love being in nature. Nature is my happiness. It's where I find my peace. It's where I find my happiness. And that's why I love, this is where I think social media can be very positive. A lot of what I show on social media is me hanging out in nature. And I love it when people message me and they're like, where's that at? I've never seen that. They're like, do you mind if I go with you? And I'm like, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm like, come with me. Like, let's get you out of the office. Let's get you out of work. Because everyone's got something going on.
Yep.
And even if it's people that never been in the military, just, real estate friends of mine here, hey, trauma's trauma. And that was
Yeah.
one thing I learned. I used to always be very bitter, like, you don't understand what I'm going through. But, trauma's trauma for anybody.
Yeah.
And I love bringing people out to nature. And you just see how it changes their mood. You see it on their face. And, I mean, like, sunrise and sunset, that's my goal. I try to catch the sunrise every morning, and I try to catch the sunset every night. And even then, it's not over for me. I love seeing the moon rise up. I love
Yep.
seeing the stars. It's hard for me to be angry when I see that. Like, it's just changed.
Well, that's the coolest thing for me with the mushrooms is the best experience I've ever had with them is in nature.
Yeah.
Being in nature, it makes me feel a connection to everything. For me, I can see the energy in the trees, and people make the comments that they want to make about the just hallucinations, but you can see the energy in the world and how it transitions from one thing to another for me. And I don't have the words or know the words to appropriately describe the peace and serenity that it provides. It's just something that I think, if you want to experience it, that's the way to do it. And I agree, the pharmaceuticals, I'm not a big fan of pharmaceuticals. Even when I'm in, it's funny, Jessa, my fiance, is a nurse, and she's like, well, you're in pain. Why don't you, take a Tylenol or Motrin? I'm like, nope, not unless I can't function. But it even helps sometimes with my joint pains.
Yeah.
I'll do it, or I'll do some of the oil, CBD oil, or whatever the oil is on the joints, and then I don't have pain anymore. But I don't have to take pharmaceutical stuff.
Yeah.
and I don't feel like crap the next day. Because I wasn't sleeping that well. And so military put me on sleeping pills. And then I was just groggy and zombie. And the next day I didn't feel like doing shit. I didn't want to do nothing. I just wanted to sit and watch TV, which isn't healthy.
No.
But then I just started doing the plant-based stuff. And now I sleep better through the night. But guess what? I wake up and I'm like, oh, I want to do something.
Yeah.
I want to get out in nature. I want to do this. I want to do that. And I feel active and feel like I have more energy to do the things I enjoy.
Yeah. So I microdose. I love the microdosing. And then I think a lot of times some people get it confused. I don't take a lot of mushrooms when I go out in nature. I might take like, let's say 1 gram of mushrooms, which I'm completely sober at that point. But I just feel this connection to like nature, you said. I can see the energy. And I'm totally aware. I can go drive my boat. I can go paddleboard. I can go hike a mountain. And there's no way you're going to tell me that's worse than sitting there and drinking a case of beer or drinking a case of whiskey. And no hangover. I feel better. I always say on mushrooms, I take 2 steps forward. You know, if I drink a bunch of alcohol that night, I'm taking 3 steps backwards.
Yeah, because I can't function for 2 days. If I get hammered, I'm non-functional for 2 days.
I can't function. And even like with just like the wifey, she's always like, I love you on mushrooms. Like you're just like such a better person. And she seemed like there was a few times where she'd be like, you seem like you're really stressed. You should probably just take some mushrooms. And she's right. It would just change my whole mood. And when I say change my mood, not temporarily, for months.
Yeah.
On end.
Me too.
That's where I like the microdosing. It is just so good. But it's not, a lot of people think they're going to take it and they're just going to go to Mars or something like that.
Yeah.
You can if you take a lot.
Yeah.
But if you do it in a controlled environment where you do a small amount or just microdosing, you're not going to get that, but it will change your mood in a good way.
That's why, like, I mean, if you know what you're doing or you're with somebody that knows what they're doing, you know, go for it on your own. But I'm a big advocate of going a controlled environment with a shaman and a very trained person, experienced person. Like the one that First Air sponsors, it's very controlled. That's what I recommend because then you know where your levels are. My threshold's very low, which I discovered. Like everyone else, I think took twice as much as me, and I took half as much as them, and I was in the same place they were. So it helped me understand what that threshold was for me, so that I didn't go crazy and travel to Mars and see weird shit. But it allowed me in an controlled environment where they also had people to guide you through the challenges. Because the first challenge in the initial part was challenging, but then after that, I started to feel peace and then more peace. And they're just there to help guide you through it, which helped me now when I do it on my own. I can recognize where I'm at those spots to continue, I want resolution on this, I want resolution on that, so that I don't just do too much. I do what I need. And then the plant-based medicine gives me what I need, not what I want.
Yeah. Man, I'm so glad we brought this up. I've actually been wanting to do like a podcast talking about this, and I'm glad with someone with your experience and like your credibility.
Yeah, well, I mean, 30 years of drugs are bad. Don't do any of that stuff in the military, which, I believed in, and I, never did any of that kind of stuff. And I was a little apprehensive to even try this because, so many jobs don't want you to do it, and they kind of frown on it because it's, nobody really knew about it, but I had so many good friends talk nothing but good stuff about it. And I didn't want to get on pharmaceuticals for my sleeping and for my pain. So I tried it. And then once I tried it, I'm like, because I'm a firm believer that if I experience it or if it's in the best interest of the boys, then I don't really care if it's a rule or not.
Yeah.
Which is probably why I was good with some people in the military and, a lot of leadership was less good with. But
yeah.
But if it's the best interest of your teammate or yourself, whether society says, that's taboo or not, then, I don't blindly follow anything anymore after all the things I've seen around the world.
Yeah.
Like I've just seen what blind followership leads to. It leads to radicals that do the harshest, inhumane atrocities in the world. So I like to, what I have started doing, especially on the mushrooms, is rather than rush into judgment, it's helped me to open my mind to try to understand someone's actions before I try to judge somebody's actions. Because there's so many cultures out there that stuff is normalized that isn't normalized for us. And there's things in our culture that are taboo that, like, mushrooms are kind of taboo. Oh, it's a gateway drug. No, the gateway drug is probably alcohol, if you really want to be specific. But there's all kinds of vices. I mean, if you have an addiction, you have an addiction. You could have addiction to video games. You could have an addiction to food, obesity. I mean, there's all kinds of addictions. But if you're using it to better you, then I don't see why it's, because somebody said it's taboo, when it may not be something that's as bad as they say it is. But it changed my life.
Oh, absolutely. You said something that was very true for me. It made me more patient.
Yeah.
It made me a lot more understanding of people and their issues, because I understood my own issues. Like, for the first time ever, I was like, I understand why I had so much anger.
Yep.
And I get it now.
Yep.
It is so positive. I had a conversation with a real good friend of mine who's very religious, and he was like, well, that's a bad idea. Like, that you're playing with like demonic stuff there. And I was like, who made the mushrooms?
Yeah.
I'm like, if God made this earth, who made the mushrooms? And he was like, you see him kind of thinking about it. And what made him think about it, I said, who told you mushrooms were bad? Was it God, or was it a man that told you it was bad? Like, why do you think it's bad? And he was like, I've never thought about it that way. I said, we've been programmed.
Yeah.
We were told from early age, this is a gateway drug. If you take psychedelics, you're going to jump off a skyscraper, you're going to do some crazy stuff. And I know why they don't want us to have it, because pharmaceutical companies would lose a lot.
Yeah.
Billions.
They can't control it.
Billions of dollars.
They can't control it, and it's easily grown.
Yeah. Man, I think that was like a great way to kind of wrap this podcast up. I'm so glad we talked about it, because I know it's about that time, put that tomahawk on the grill and try a little bit of that rare stash. But, you did 30 years. What kind of advice would you give? Let me ask you this. Would you go back and do it all over again?
So that's the big question. Would you change anything in your life? And obviously a lot of people are like, yeah, I'd love to change these things. But then, if you really think about it and dissect it, if you change something, then you wouldn't be who you are today. And if you're not, so you're saying you're not happy with who you are today and where you are. And I'm happy and content with who I am and where I am today. So if I changed anything, then I may not be who I am today or where I am today. Or there's some things that, potentially I wish were a little bit different. Yeah, there's some things that potentially I wish was a little bit different, but then if it was different, I wouldn't be who I am today and where I am today. So I don't know if I would change a lot. I mean, obviously I'd, love to have some of my teammates back and for a little bit longer and have, my son back. But I also believe that some of the experiences that I've had with the microdosing and when I go deep into meditation, I believe our soul is pure energy. So whether you want to back that up with religion or science, your pure energy or your soul for religion, pure energy for science. That's how the body has energy within it. So it's pure energy. Pure energy never stops. It never goes away. Your soul is your pure energy. So it will just transition to something else. I say all that to say, I'd like to have more time with my teammates and my son, but I believe I will. I believe that I'll have more time with them when my soul or my pure energy transitions to the next phase and I get to link up with them again.
Yeah, it's perfectly said. Perfectly said. Would you give any advice to any young guys that want to go into special operations, 16, 17-year-olds?
Obviously, I have a fondness for the Air Force and for our community within Special Tactics. I will say that you'll probably get treated better in some of the other soft entities. To be honest with you, a buddy of mine, Marine buddy of mine, his son was looking at Air Force coming into Special Tactics, and then he was talking to him about going into MARSOC, and I told him, have you ever thought about the agency? And the reason why I say that is one thing that I've always thought is kind of stupid about the military, especially the enlisted side of the house, is you either have to move up or out. You can't just stay an operator, which if somebody wants to stay an operator for their entire career, why not? Whereas with the agency, you could stay an operator until you're done being an operator, and then you go do a staff job. So I recommend that if you have the ability to do that, to maybe consider that, unless at some point they change and allow operators, if they want to stay operator until their body gives out on them, and then they go to a staff job, then they go to a staff job. But don't force people out after you've invested millions of dollars in them just because they're at 10 years. If they're at 10 years and they're still a good operator, then let them stay. And then people say, well, how do you keep, shitbags from staying in? Deny reenlistment. Deny them staying in. If they're shitbag, then they go away. But if they're good, if they're working hard and doing good, then let them stay at the thing that they're at. So I say all that to say that I'd probably recommend the agency route because you have that kind of pathway. Mm-hmm. But any soft community, what I have learned, whether it's MARSOC, Marine, Air Force, Army, Navy, whatever branch you go into, it's more about the people you work with because all the missions are fairly similar and you'll get your adrenaline rush from the mission and the training. Any of them are a good choice. Work hard, don't bitch, learn how to overcome adversity, and problem solve.
Perfect. Ken, that's a wrap, man.
Yep.
That was such a good episode, man. Like, seriously, that was so good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Let's wrap that up. Man, that was good. I'm glad we talked about the mushrooms at the beginning.
Yeah, me too.
I'm so glad we did.